Twitter is displaying China-made ads attacking Hong Kong protesters. Twitter ads are being used as political weapons. Before I get into the bulk of this story, first, for those that aren't familiar, in Hong Kong, they are protesting against a Chinese extradition bill. Hong Kong is supposed to be autonomous from China, and they're fighting for what they view as democracy. They're pro-democracy protesters. They're waving the American flag. They're singing the U.S. national anthem. Not everybody, but a lot of them. So they have my support in that capacity because I believe protest is a fundamental human right to reject authoritarianism. I'm not saying that they're fighting for the right thing. I don't know the full details, but I can tell you this. They have a right to protest. That's true of everyone in the United States as well. You don't have a right to go around beating random people is where I draw the line with Antifa. But by all means, if the left wants to go out and even do a sit-in blocking an intersection and get arrested for it, civil disobedience is, in my opinion, an American pastime. Okay, that's what we do. We fight for change with, nonviolent resistance. You can disrupt a system, you can force that change, and you can do it without hurting people. Now, admittedly, this kind of disruption can hurt businesses, which can have a ripple effect, but for the most part, you get the point. Don't whack someone over the head. Here's the thing. When Hong Kong was in the news, I was so confused as to why it wasn't trending. I noticed that Chris Cuomo, the Fredo story, was number one. It was a worldwide trend, and I said, how? How is no one talking about Hong Kong? In fact, actually, people were talking about Hong Kong, but why wasn't it trending? Some suggested to me that they thought Twitter was suppressing it, and I said, I really don't think so. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, but I will admit, Twitter displaying anti-Hong Kong protest propaganda, I find questionable. But, should Twitter not take ads from governments to sponsor these things? Honestly, I lean more towards you should be able to buy ads. I'm not gonna say that people in China shouldn't be able to condemn the protests. We don't know who made it. It probably was the Communist Party. I don't trust them, but I do believe in speech. So what's gonna happen? They did the ads. I get it. I'm gonna call them out and we're gonna talk about it. That's the way things are supposed to work. When conservative pro-life types want to buy ads, they use that argument. Oh, we're not gonna allow that. Well, that's not fair. You can't control the government in that way. So if Twitter is gonna allow these ads, I will criticize them, and I don't know if removing them is the right thing. I don't know if banning them is the right thing. I lean towards no. I lean towards sunlight being the best disinfectant. Now, admittedly, the one thing that gives me pause in this regard compared to others is that it's potentially government propaganda hitting Americans, presumably Americans. Well, let's read the story. Before we get started, though, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address you can send things to. And the thing is, I'm not a communist. And I'm going to be criticizing communists. And as a capitalist, I require currency to continue to function in this capitalist society, which means if I can convince you that I have done something worthy of you handing me a green picture of a dead president, then I've done my job. And if not, you can watch for free anyway. Today, this is called the pay what you will model. It's a new kind of thing. Basically means I hope that by getting as many people as possible to watch this, enough people will say, I will support this work. So you get the information and the commentary for free, and if you like it, you can choose to support me. But let's read. They say, Twitter is finding itself, let me zoom in here. Twitter is finding itself at the heart of a heated political battle. Pinboard and other users have observed Twitter running ads from China's state-backed media outlet Xinhua, attacking the Hong Kong protesters opposed to both a since-suspended extradition bill and broader dissatisfaction with the government and police brutality. The ads try to portray the protests as escalating violence and calls for order to be restored. Other ads have highlighted alleged supporters of the Chinese motherland and have pointed out Hong Kong's economic troubles from earlier in the year. We asked Twitter for a comment. However, Xinhua's campaign appears to target at least some people in Hong Kong proper. I will stress this point. The Hong Kong protesters who are beating people are wrong, 100%. There's a story of a journalist. They thought he was a cop, so they tied him up and they roughed him up a little bit. They found business cards for the police and they said, aha, he must be a cop. They beat him up. Turns out he wasn't. It turns out he was a journalist who had a business card for some of these people. The news agency in Hong Kong confirmed this guy is a reporter, and they beat him up. And now there's some kind of phrase. I don't know a whole lot, so you got to fact check me on this one. But there's a phrase being spouted that says something like, "I support the police. You can beat me up now." The reason this is an important point to be made. In the United States, the right says that they support the police, and Antifa beats them up. In Hong Kong, there are people supporting the police, and protesters beat them up. It's wrong. I support protests. That's not something common to, communist China. if you can really call it communist, but sure. For the most part, it's a very authoritarian system. Anybody who wants to protest against the machine and challenge the authority, you have my blessing. Within reason. Obviously, everything's not black and white. But beating up random people, absolutely not. You're no different than Antifa at that point. My principles are static regardless of your country and circumstance. You want to fight against communism? You have my blessing. You want to go beat up random people out of a suspicion that they're fascists or communists? No. Sorry. Don't play that game. If somebody in the United States carrying a flag walked to someone and said, I bet you're a communist, start beating them? No, you're in the wrong. Typically in the US, it is the communists. People like Antifa who do the fighting. Hong Kong gets no free pass. But in the long run, I recognize police shouldn't be whacking people over the head. That goes for people in the, actually, I'll draw that line with Antifa, and this is the big challenge. I don't know enough about Hong Kong to call out who started the violence. I can tell you, at least as it pertains to the US, when you have the right and the left at each other's throats and the police come in, well, that's very different. I'm not going to blame the police for necessarily starting something if they're intervening with two factions. In Hong Kong, you have one protest group and the police. If the police start it, which I have seen a lot in my experience, police typically starting the conflict, well, then they're at fault. So I'll make that point, I guess. It's different here when the police and the protesters get into a fight. The police typically face Antifa and let the right do their thing because the right tends to be planning to be peaceful and the police know it. The left uses this as propaganda. But let's read on. They say, this kind of behavior isn't shocking. The Chinese government has been clamping down on critics who voice dissent on Twitter, even though the service is blocked beyond Hong Kong. The country has been determined to control the political conversation on social networks, whether or not most Chinese can see them. In that regard, this is just an extension of its current tactics. It does put Twitter in an awkward position, though. While the social site is no stranger to attempts at political manipulation, it's now faced with China using ads as propaganda weapons to silence political opposition. If it keeps the ads running, it risks alienating Hong Kong and free speech advocates. At the same time, blocking ads from a major government-supported publication could provoke a harsh response with difficult-to-predict consequences. So here's the tweet from Pinboard. Let's jump to Twitter because it's actually a long thread. Pinboard is the C-SPAN in the tweets, C-PAN in the sheets. I have no idea what that means or what Pinboard is. That's not, really describing it for me, but let's read. They say, every day I go out and see stuff with my own eyes. And then I go report it on Twitter and see promoted tweets saying the opposite of what I saw. Twitter is taking money from Chinese propaganda outfits and running these promoted tweets against the top Hong Kong protest hashtags. And we can see this right here from Xinhua. What China is doing is clear. If these peaceful, extremely self-disciplined protesters who enjoy the clear backing of the overwhelming majority of Hong Kongers can be discredited, it will be easier to crack down. What the F Twitter thinks it's doing is less clear. Twitter is just buying ads. They're not taking a political stance. I don't know if I think Twitter is in the wrong on this one, but Pinboard is correct. It's something like over 1 million, almost 2 million people peacefully protesting in the streets. That's the right way to do it. That is the respectable way to protest, especially when they wave the American flag. Now you're flattering us, okay? So of course, I'm going to give you a smile and a wink when I see that old red, white, and blue stars and stripes waving in your country. But I'm being somewhat facetious, although it is pretty cool to see that. They say if you work at Twitter, I'm asking you on bended knee to make it stop. Don't be complicit in this. That's a challenge, isn't it? I don't know if they should. I think if somebody wants to buy ads, shouldn't they be allowed to? It's really challenging. The fact that you can highlight this and call it out is the appropriate response. They say, Xinhua, the agency buying these tweets, has literally referred to the Hong Kong protesters as cockroaches. Today, a 17-year-old kid at a march insisted on holding his umbrella over my head for 3 miles because it was raining. I looked very carefully. No antenna, human eyes. Please, if you're getting them to, post or describe your favorite paid Chinese propaganda tweet in this thread. Here's the question. A bunch of young people in Hong Kong are standing up to their government at terrific personal risk to fight for basic human rights. Will a bunch of Twitter employees at far less risk stand up to their CEO and refuse to be used as weapons against them? I don't know if I agree with that. I think the way you stand up is tweeting. There was a thing called Thunderclap, where everybody would subscribe, and at the same time, it would automatically tweet from every account, causing a massive trend. That's the effective way to combat this. Now, I will say the challenge is the Chinese government has money to spare, and the protesters don't. But I don't think shutting them down and forcing Twitter not to buy ads is the appropriate response. That sounds like activists trying to force a company to block content they don't like. I'm not a fan of the Chinese government or propaganda, quite the opposite. And it looks like these protesters are overwhelmingly peaceful and in the right. You've got 1.7 million people, I think. Have them all post a message with the hashtag pushing back on the propaganda. I think that's the appropriate response. Let me know what you think, though, because I'm not an expert. These are complicated, nuanced discussions here, so I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. Next segment will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. Stay tuned. Podcast at 6:30 p.m., and I will see you all next time.